Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 52 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about some NFL Combine winners and losers. Combine wrapped up this weekend. We had some running backs and wide receivers mostly do all of their drills on the Saturday portion of the Combine. And so we're going to talk about some players that stood out, made a name for themselves, and really solidified their status in the draft. So before we do that, though, as always, make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We are on everything out there, so whether you're Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc., we are there. So go make sure you're following this show so you don't miss any future episodes. And go find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Dynasty War Room. We have a Facebook page, and then go subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And with all that being said, let's jump on into today's show and discuss some winners and losers of the NFL Combine. So starting off, let's just talk about the quarterback position as a whole, both winners and losers, before we move into running backs and wide receivers and tight ends. There really wasn't much to take away from the Combine in terms of the quarterbacks. I really don't think anybody can qualify as a winner, and really not so much as a loser either. I would say that Jackson Dart, didn't necessarily separate himself in terms of his performance at the Combine. It doesn't seem like there's really anything to take away from any of the drills, but the talk in terms of the throwing portion of the Combine, not all that great for anyone, and certainly not enough to necessarily boost Dart up into that top 10 conversation. Now we'll see how things shape out with pro days and everything else leading up to the draft in terms of trades and just teams always being quarterback needy and desperate, making strange moves and stuff at the position. So we'll see how things go. But today we're going to primarily focus on running backs and wide receivers. And so let's talk about some running backs. That's the highlight of this class, are the running backs. And I have four names here that I think really had great combines and were clear-cut winners at the position. And probably the biggest winner of all, across all positions, is going to be Bashal Tutin, 5'9", 206 pounds, running back from Virginia Tech. And Tutin is somebody that he transferred to Virginia Tech after a couple seasons at a smaller school, and then he moved on over to Virginia Tech. And coming into the Combine, he was being talked about as a day 3 guy, a 4th, 5th round pick. And now he might have a real chance to go on day 2. We're talking 4.32 40-yard dash. Best time at the Combine among running backs, and 98th percentile speed score, which is something that is used to categorize just how fast players truly are given their size, because obviously a 225-pound running back running a 4.4 is different than a 190-pound running back running a 4.4. So just something to keep in mind in terms of just how fast these players truly are, and Speed Score does a good job of letting us know where players fall. And so 98th percentile, awesome number, and it was the best in the class. So, and it wasn't just the 40-yard dash that Tutin exceeded at, or excelled at, and he was the number 1 player in the class, both in the vertical jump and the 10-yard split. The 10-yard split probably more important. He had a 1.49, which is really, really good. And but vertical jump and then broad jump, where he was second in this class, that goes to show his explosion and just his ability to just move when the ball is snapped and get those quick bursts of speed, and that's really what you're looking for in a running back. The long speed is not necessarily as important. I think a good example of this would be Quinshon Judkins, a player that maybe doesn't have the long speed that his teammate Travion Henderson has, but someone that is very explosive in the short term, and that's what you want to see at from the running back position. You want a player that can get you that 4, 5, 6 yards per carry, and break out for 10 plus yard runs. Now, is he going to have 50, 60, 70 yard touchdown runs all the time? No, probably not. Talking about Quinshon Judkins, but that just kind of tells you a bit about why that explosiveness matters. And that's what the vertical jump and the broad jump, they both measure that in a pretty good way. And so when you combine just how strong of a performance Bashal Tutin had in those two categories, and then add in the 4.32 40-yard dash, this is a guy that seems like he can do it all from an athletic standpoint. And I would expect that he probably moves into the third round now, which is a great sign both for him, obviously, but also for this draft class, which is largely being propped up by the depth at running back. This is not a rookie class that is strong at quarterback or wide receiver. There's a couple really nice tight ends, and then it's running back where, we could see 25 plus running backs drafted in this class. That's how good of a class it is. And there's a ton of guys that are going to have a fantasy impact in years 1 and 2 in the league. So Bashal Tutin, the first big winner of the running back class from the NFL Combine. I think it's a pretty consensus. You're not going to find anybody that says, anything bad about Tutin after this kind of performance. And I think everyone is now on notice that he is in that top, 7 or 8 in this class at the position, maybe even higher depending on who you ask. Now, the next player I want to mention is Omarion Hampton, running back from North Carolina, 6 foot, 221 pounds. He's currently being projected as a second-round pick, although we've seen some projections lately that have him sneaking into the first round, which, of course, would be great for fantasy. And he had a 4.46 40-yard dash, which was good for a 94th percentile speed score. And so we mentioned how the speed score encompasses their weight, their size, and so Omarion Hampton at 6 foot, 221 pounds, ran a 4.46 40-yard dash. That is an incredible number. That is really, really great to see, and I think that's going to go a long way into boosting his stock because his other numbers were also very good at the Combine. Wasn't necessarily as dominant across the board like Tutin was. However, still was 8th in the class in the 10-yard split with a 1.54. He was 7th in the class in vertical jump and tied for 2nd in the class in broad jump with Tutin. So really good explosive numbers, and especially given that size, 221 pounds, that is somebody that can be a 3-down running back in the NFL. He can catch the ball, and I haven't finalized my rankings yet. In fact, we'll probably have a show where we do kind of an unveiling of my overall rankings, my first edition, either next week or the week after. But Omarion Hampton is going to be in the conversation for running back 2 behind Ashton Genty. Now, I don't know if he will be my number 2 running back, but he certainly will be in that discussion. It's really a loaded class at the top for running back. I think that your RB2 through 5, you could even go through 6 or 7, are pretty much interchangeable. A lot of really good players, and I think that draft capital and landing spot will ultimately determine the order of those players. Right now, you got, of course, Omarion Hampton in that conversation, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Caleb Johnson, kind of the consensus 2 through 5. But now, hey, Bashal Tutin and Cam Scatterbo are there, Devin Neal. I mean, so there's a lot of guys at this running back position that stand out. But Omarion Hampton, a clear winner from the NFL Combine, putting up those kind of numbers at his size. The third running back I want to mention is Quinshon Judkins. So we briefly mentioned him earlier, and he came in at 6 foot, 221 pounds as well. So the same size as Omarion Hampton, and he's being projected as a second-round pick and ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. So very, very similar to Omarion Hampton. Comes in at the 91st percentile speed score and had a 1.51 in the 10-yard split, which was a little bit better, actually, than Hampton. Tied for second best in this class. He was first in the class at the broad jump with 11 feet and was tied for 4th in the class in the vertical jump. So the explosive marks, great across the board for Judkins. The speed is there. And that was the big question, I think, for Judkins was, is he someone that is, just a short yardage, bigger body back, he doesn't have a huge receiving profile, but he really had a great performance. Arguably, he's right there behind Tootin in terms of just big time winners from the NFL Combine. Hampton, obviously, a lot of help to his draft stock, but Judkins, I think, answered probably the most questions because there was some concern about his speed. And, we all remember that run from the title game where he got caught and whatnot. So, or from the college football playoff. I can't remember if that was against Notre Dame or not, but it's, we all know the run that I'm referencing where he got caught from behind. And again, it's one of those things where in the NFL, you're not having too many of those long breakout runs where you have to worry about being caught by a corner or a safety from, 50, 60 yards out. You want the guy that can move the chains and just continue to pick up first downs and break off the occasional 10 to 20 yard run and be a red zone guy too. And that's what somebody with this size is going to be able to do in the NFL. So Quinshon Judkins definitely helped out his position in my rankings following the Combine. And the final running back I want to touch on is DJ Giddens from Kansas State. Came in at 6 foot, 212 pounds, being a projected 4th round pick at the moment. And this is someone that I think did a good job of potentially separating himself as one of those, day 3 running backs that could have a real place in the NFL. He ran a 4.43 in the 40-yard dash, which is good for a 91st percentile speed score, which is the same as Quinshon Judkins. 7th best 10-yard split in the class at 1.53, and was tied for 2nd in the class, both in the vertical jump and the broad jump. So very good numbers there. Shows that he has that explosive ability, just the short burst that you really are looking for in a running back, and has some speed too with the 4.43 overall. He's somebody that certainly will have a role in the NFL and will move on up given his combine performance. Moving on over to the wide receivers, I have a handful of players here that I want to mention as well. And this was something where, Tet McMillan did not participate in drills, neither did Emeka Egbuka. At the running back position, Ashton Genty did not participate in everything. But and we didn't get a 40 time for Cam Scadaboo, which would have been nice. But sometimes when there's questions about speed, it's better to wait and do it at your pro day, which is the route that he opted to take. But wide receiver, there were a lot of players that I think showed that they are, upper tier athletes that will fit the bill of what we're looking for, especially in the second round of rookie drafts. I really don't think that we learned too much about potential first round rookie picks at the position. I think, Luther Burden was somebody that competed and had some nice numbers and kind of showed that he's just a good all-around athlete. Didn't necessarily blow anyone away in terms of his numbers, but had a very good gauntlet drill. But in terms of those top wide receivers, we didn't learn a ton. However, some names here that I think will make good picks in the second round based on current knowledge. And we'll start off with Matthew Golden, 5'11", 191 pounds, out of Texas, being slotted in as a second-round pick, although there's been a lot of first-round buzz for Matthew Golden as of late, so he could certainly sneak into the first round. And he had the fastest 40-yard dash time at the position with a 4.29. So back-to-back years that a Texas wide receiver had the fastest 40 time at the Combine. And he was also tied for first in the 10-yard split at 1.49, which was the same mark that Bishal Tootin also had at the running back position. So really good number. He's somebody that, seems like he demonstrates some good route running abilities and obviously has the speed and athleticism to have a role in the NFL, and we'll see where he goes. I think that draft capital is going to matter a lot for Matthew Golden. If he's a first-round pick, that will change the conversation around him in terms of, does he go in the back half of first rounds in rookie drafts, or if he's a second-round pick or later, he's going to fall somewhere in the second round. It's just a matter of, is he going to be at the top? Is he going to be at the back half? A lot of that will come down to where he lands, but also how the running backs shake out, because I think the running backs are going to control how your dynasty rookie drafts play out just because of how strong the class is. And of course, everyone always needs a running back. Now, the next player that just dominated the Combine is going to be Jalen Noel, 5'10", 194 pounds, wide receiver that's currently being projected to be a third-round pick, and he was awesome. I mean, he dominated the combine across the board. Almost every single event, he was great. And he had a 4.39 in the 40-yard dash. He was tied for first in the vertical with 41.5 inch jump, so very good mark to see there for a wide receiver. And he was also first in the broad jump with over 11 feet 2 inches. He was first in the bench press, and he was tied for fifth in both the 3-cone drill and the shuttle. So, just a really, really nice number. And again, this is Jalen Noel from Iowa State, and somebody that I think helped his draft stock out a lot and should be a solid day 2 pick now at this point, a third-round guy. Now, he doesn't have great size, but he is still 5'10", 194. It's enough to get on the field, and we've seen plenty of guys around that size be productive NFL players. But Jalen Noel, awesome combine, and probably a name to keep an eye on that you might not know if you were not a true college diehard fan, given that he played at Iowa State. Next up is going to be Jalen Royals, small school guy from Utah State, 6 foot, 205 pounds. He's currently being projected as a third-round pick, which, of course, we want that day 2 draft capital. And he had a 4.42 40-yard dash, very good mark there given his size. And he was tied for first in the 10-yard split with a 1.49 with Matthew Golden. So I think that shows you just his quickness, his release off the line can be very good, given the fact that he had, that tied for first at that 10-yard split with Matthew Golden, who had a significantly faster 40-yard dash overall. But he also matched up with Tootin at the running back spot. So again, that short area burst is something that we like. And with wide receivers, you want guys that can get off the line quickly, get open, and at his size, which is a pretty solid, number, 6 foot 205. That's kind of where you want your receivers to be, is somewhere in that type of range. And he has certainly some potential to be a valuable piece in your drafts somewhere in the second round. Next up is Jaden Higgins, another guy that just a very productive player, 6'4", 214 pounds. He's currently being projected as a third-round pick, and he is, one of those players that at that size, you really are just excited and hopeful that he can end up in a good landing spot, because players at 6'4", 214 pounds that ran a 4.47 in the 40-yard dash, that's a really, really nice combo. And, size and speed in the NFL is everything. So, Jaden Higgins, he was 1.53 in the 10-yard split. So good, not elite, but still a good number there. And I don't know if I mentioned, but he is another guy from Iowa State. So a couple of good receivers here that tested very well from Iowa State. And 6th in the vertical, 7th in the broad jump. So pretty solid explosive numbers as well. And I think that will help his draft capital ensure that he is a third-round pick, which, given kind of the lack of depth in this class, having some of these players like Higgins, Royals, Noel, Golden all perform well. And there are others too. This is not, I only am going to highlight really those 4 names as combine winners, but there were a lot of other receivers that still had nice combines. Alec Ayomanor, tough name to say, but at a wide receiver at Stanford, he had a couple nice performances. There's just a lot of names in this third round range that we hope stay on day 2, and that will boost the depth and value of this entire class. Now, one other wide receiver that I just wanted to at least name drop was Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech. And he was basically top 5 in every single category across the board at the wide receiver position. He is a smaller guy and not really projected to be a high pick. He's more of a later day 3 guy, maybe 5th, 6th, 7th round. And so for that reasons, I'm not going to talk about him too much, but just want to throw his name out there as somebody who did have a very good NFL combine, certainly did not hurt his stock, and maybe is somebody that you can pay attention to as a 4th round pick come draft season. And at tight end, really only one name to highlight in terms of the winners at tight end. Not a lot of action at the position between the top two names. Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland didn't do drills. Both came in at good sizes and will still be the top two guys at the position pretty much across the board. However, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon, he comes in at 6'5", 247 pounds, currently being projected as a 4th-round pick. And he had a 4.63 40-yard dash, which was the best in this class of those tight ends who actually participated in drills. He was first in the 10-yard split, first in the vertical, and third in the broad jump. So a really, really nice combine for Terrence Ferguson, who is a name that you can now put on your radar, probably as a 3rd-round pick in your dynasty drafts, your dynasty rookie drafts, and was the best tight end at the drills over the weekend. Moving on to our losers. Now, I don't have quite as many names across the board, but that's a good thing for Dynasty. We talked about Jackson Dart at QB, and just kind of the position in general there's not a lot of takeaways in terms of the quarterbacks. So we'll move on to the running backs, where I don't think anybody necessarily tanked their value or significantly hurt their draft stock or anything like that, at least not among the bigger name players. But I do want to highlight a few players that are consensus, top 10 running backs that did not have great combines, or at least felt a little bit disappointing. And I'm going to start with Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma State running back, 6'1", 226 pounds. He's being projected as a 4th-round pick. And Gordon is someone that had an outstanding 2023, was, the Doak Walker Award winner, was kind of the consensus top prospect at running back, and just had a really down year in 2024. Oklahoma State was not very good. The O-line struggled. It was just a mess of a lot of different things coming together. He had some legal trouble in the offseason as well. So he ran a 4.61 40-yard dash, which was good for a 66th percentile speed score, which is okay. It's not going to necessarily kill his value, but doesn't help him either. A bigger running back, he's more of a power back, but that speed score definitely leaves something to be desired. He had the 3rd slowest 10-yard split. In fact, the 4 players that I'm going to mention here were the bottom 4 players at the 10-yard split among all running backs that participated at the combine. So don't love that. And then he really didn't have very good numbers in either the vertical or the broad jump either. So just another thing that shows he kind of lacks that explosive ability and that short area burst. So Ollie Gordon, someone that did not help his draft stock. I really don't see a path to him being a 3rd-round pick anymore. I think he's probably locked into that 4th, 5th round range, and is just going to be behind a lot of other guys. Next up is Caleb Johnson from Iowa, who is a player that I really like, and leading up to the combine was probably my number 2 running back. I think he's a really good player, a very productive player from Iowa. He came in at 6'1", 224 pounds, and is being projected as a 2nd-round pick. So similar size to Ollie Gordon, and he ran a 4.57 40-yard dash, so a little bit better, 73rd percentile speed score, which is, again, okay, not great, could have been better. Really would have liked to see, a 4.50 or a slower 4.48, 4.49, something like that. But again, this isn't something that's going to tank his value, but I do think that there's a possibility that these numbers could hurt his draft stock, which would then drop his ranking. If right now I'm talking about him as my potential number 2 running back, this could ding him down to the 3rd or 4th or even 5th running back on that list, depending on where people go in the draft. He didn't do full testing, but he did have the slowest 10-yard split time, tied with Jordan James, who, spoiler alert, is going to be on this list. And so just not great. I really wish he would have been a little bit faster, but he is a big power back. So this is not necessarily someone that we were looking at to be a speedster, but I think part of what really appealed about Caleb Johnson is that he looks faster on tape, and getting somebody at his size at 6'1", 224, that could have run a 4.4 would have been really, really nice and, made him that much more appealing in rookie drafts. The third player on this list is going to be Devin Neal, Kansas running back, 5'11", 213 pounds, being projected as a 4th-round pick. And he ran a 4.58 in the 40-yard dash, which was good for a 53rd percentile speed score. So even worse than the previous two players. Just not a good mark for him. Somebody that, he did come in at the size that we were hoping for at 213, but he's slow, which, we never love to see that. And 53rd percentile speed score is not great, especially when he comes in 11 pounds lighter than Caleb Johnson, but was not as fast. So he had the 4th slowest 10-yard split, and it's not all bad for Devin Neal, so I don't want to just say that his value tanked or anything like that. It's kind of similar to Caleb Johnson, where it doesn't necessarily hurt him too much, but it didn't really help him. He had above average marks in both the vertical and the broad jump, so still demonstrated a bit of short area quickness and burst there that we like to see, but just doesn't have the long speed or, just the speed is not there, and that's unfortunate for Devin Neal. The final player is Jordan James out of Oregon. He's 5'9", 205 pounds. He's being projected as a later day 3 pick, so not necessarily somebody that is too fantasy relevant, but he is somebody that is coming from a big school, of course, in Oregon, and he had a 4.55 40-yard dash, which was a 47th percentile speed score, which is really, really bad. I mean, that's players that have a speed score below the 50th percentile do not work out very often, and someone with his size at 5'9", 205, you really need speed to be kind of a key part of their game in order for them to have a successful career, and he just doesn't have it. He also doesn't have the explosiveness. He was tied for the worst broad jump among all running backs, so I just don't see it with him. We had some luck last year with Bucky Irving, who did not test well at Oregon, but ended up being a very successful running back. I don't see it this time around with Jordan James, because it's different from Bucky Irving, who had more of the stats in the film to back him up. I don't see it here with James. So not a great day for Jordan James. At wide receiver, there's not a ton of players that I would say had a bad combine. So that's good for fantasy. However, I think the class just is lacking something as a whole. I just don't feel awesome about very many of these wide receivers. So first, I think fantasy managers are, losers from the wide receiver portion of the combine, because we didn't get to see Tet McMillan, we didn't get to see Emeka Egbuka, who are 2 of the top wide receivers in this draft, and it would have been nice to see them. I know that it's common for those top prospects to sit out. We saw it at other positions as well, but I think it would have been nice to at least have seen Egbuka play or do drills and test, given that McMillan is probably solidified as the number 1 receiver in the draft, but still a bit of a downer there. Now, in terms of players that did compete but had a rough showing, the first guy I want to talk about is Isaiah Bond from Texas. Now, Isaiah Bond is not someone that necessarily had a bad combine per se, but he did kind of clown himself a bit coming into the weekend, talking about how he was going to break the record in the 40-yard dash, and he was going to run a 4.1 or maybe a 4.2, and just very, very confident that he was going to blow things away. And he was not the fastest receiver. He did not break the record. He was not even the fastest Texas player at the combine, but his 40-yard dash time was still not terrible, but it was a 4.39, and you can't come out and say you're going to run a 4.1 and then not come anywhere close. He's someone that I don't love as a prospect. He's one of those guys that has to rely on speed and doesn't seem to have much else going for him, so I don't love the prospect. And so he's going to be the first player on this list. The other is Tez Johnson, another, smaller guy that is relying on speed. He's only 154 pounds, and yet he ran a 4.51 in the 40-yard dash. you would expect somebody that's that light and that small to be faster, and he just wasn't. He does not have the long speed, which is not great for him. However, it's not all bad for Tez Johnson. He was very good in the agility drills, the shuttle and the 3-cone. So I think this is someone that he's just going to be one of those slot guys that is shifty, that you do trick plays for and you try to manufacture touches just to get him in space, but not somebody that's going to just run by you. So not a great performance from him, another Oregon guy that just didn't test all that great. At tight end, there's really only two players worth talking about, and they are, some bigger names at the position, which is unfortunate. The first guy I want to mention is Gunnar Helm out of Texas, who came in at 6'5", 241 pounds, projected to be a 4th-round pick, and he ran a 4.84 40-yard dash, which is atrocious. Athleticism at the tight end position is extremely important. The combine does a very good job of helping people or helping us as fantasy analysts and fantasy managers pick out the players that truly can make an impact at the next level at tight end. You have to have good athleticism, size, speed, agility, explosiveness to be a good NFL tight end. Now, in Gunnar Helm's defense, news came out on Sunday that he sprained his ankle and then completed the drills anyways. And so I don't know if you have not seen the photos of his ankle yet, you should go check that out online. And it fully explains why he struggled so much in the drills, both in the 40-yard dash and in other events, because his ankle was like the size of a bowling ball. It seemed like it looks gross. He had a false start on his first attempt in the 40-yard dash, and that is apparently where he sprained his ankle or twisted his ankle, one of the two. And that explains a lot. And assuming he is healthy enough to compete in his pro day in April, that will give him another opportunity to post a better time, show that, he is in fact a better athlete than what he showed with a sprained ankle, which I hope he does, because, that's a pretty tough situation as an athlete to, here you are and, at the NFL Combine competing for a chance to be a day 2 pick in the NFL draft, and to have things go so poorly is rough. I'm surprised in a way that he completed the drills. Maybe it would have been better for him to sit out, but I think, of course, he was trying to show toughness and all that. I just don't know if that was necessarily the time and place to do it, because now people are going to see these numbers and just think poorly of him as a player. So I'm willing to give him another shot, but in terms of his actual numbers from the Combine, not great. And the final player that I want to touch on is Harold Fannin Jr., tight end out of Bowling Green. 6'3", 241 pounds, projected 3rd-round pick. And this is someone who had incredible stats at Bowling Green, just an outstanding college tight end. The problem is, of course, he played at Bowling Green. It was against lesser competition. He came in undersized at 6'3", 241 pounds. Would have preferred him to come in at 6'5" or even 6'4", but he's a little bit undersized. And we talked about how athleticism is so important at this position, and he just didn't show it. His gauntlet drill was really bad. He ran a 4.71 40-yard dash, which is okay, but certainly not good. And he was decent in the agility drills, but just kind of showed a general lack of athleticism, which is unfortunate because it pretty significantly reduces his odds of being a successful NFL tight end. And as somebody that was being billed as, the number 3 tight end in this class, I think this is going to drop him potentially into the 4th round, which is a bummer for everyone involved, because you want the players that put up crazy numbers in college to then do well in the pros. And you want to see those players rewarded. It's fun for fantasy when you see guys that put up 1 billion yards in college do the same thing in the NFL. But the odds are going to be a little bit stacked against him now. And so Harold Fannin Jr. Will need to bounce back at his pro day and, just hope that he can stay in the 3rd round, because that will still leave him with some pretty solid value. But I think we can, lose him from the conversation of, does he belong in the first round? How does he compare to Loveland and Warren? And I just don't think he's in the same conversation anymore. I think he's in that second or third group of tight ends, and we'll see how the position shakes out. But just a rough day for him. Not terrible. Again, this isn't something that's going to destroy his value, but certainly not a good day for him, and that stinks. So there you have it. There is our NFL Combine recap. We talked about a bunch of different players here that had very nice Combine performances, along with some that struggled, and how that might impact their draft performance. And we will be back again with some more rookie talk next week, and we're going to get into some rankings like we mentioned in the next week or two, and really start to break down where we think these players belong. And just as a precursor to that, before we get into those shows next week and into the rest of March and April, but this rookie class is very, very different than last year in the fact that I don't think there's a consensus order of players in the first round, hardly at all, outside of Ashton Jeanty going number 1. And that is completely different from last year, where it felt like the top 8 picks were pretty much marked in stone, by this time last year. Everyone knew it was going to be Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Jaden Daniels, the other quarterbacks with Drake May, JJ McCarthy, and then Rome Odunze. So it's Brock Bowers. I mean, this is very, very different. I just don't see this class being anywhere near as strong overall. Very good running back class, much, much better running back class than last year, but it's kind of the inverse of last year, where, good at quarterback, good at receiver, obviously the all-time potential great at tight end and Brock Bowers, but then just really, really bad running backs. This time it's the other way around. Really, really good running backs, maybe okay at quarterback, decent at tight end, with at least the 2 very good players, but a pretty rough class at wide receiver. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But running back draft capital in rookie drafts depends so much on where they get picked in terms of round and, of course, what team they go to, that it's going to be a lot tougher to rank and project players this year compared to last year. So just wanted to touch on that. If you stuck around to the end, you got that little tidbit here. And I appreciate you all for listening. This is the Dynasty War Room Podcast. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and we will talk to you all next week.